It is a universally common belief that our dreams can sometimes signify something important in real life. And when considering there is nothing more important in life than a matter of life and death, it is perhaps only natural for some of it to seep into our dream. Indeed, stories about precognitive dreams before an impending disaster or death can be found all around the world and throughout the history. But some of today's stories suggest something beyond mere precognition. Sometimes, it seems, what you decide to do in your dream could change the course of life and death of yourself or of your beloved ones. Literally, what you do in your dream might save a life in reality. I can't say anyway authoritatively, but I don't think I have come across such stories from other countries very often. So I imagine such belief is, if not unique, at least more widespread in Korea. I'd also point out many of today's stories contain bits of elements and images from traditional spiritualities. There are references of Granny Samsin, the goddess of birth, Korean Grim Reaper, memorial ritual, and traditional views of the underworld. If you don't know yet what those are, I dealt with them in my previous episodes, so I recommend you to check them out. Links to the relevant episodes are in the description. I find it fascinating that while life and death is a universal matter, how it's depicted are often culture-specific. So, here are 5 allegedly true stories about dreams that might have changed the course of life and death. As always, handpicked, translated and narrated by your host, Anthony. It's a story from when my parents were a young couple about 30 years ago. My dad was working as a teacher in the countryside, and he met my mom when she visited there as a tourist. My dad used to ride his motorbike to work. Public transportation was not frequent nor very convenient in the countryside village, so my dad, still a young man in his 20s, rode bike along the dusty road, flying his fashionably long hair of the early 80s. So, my mom saw him off that morning as usual, with a 2-year-old me in her arms. But for some reason, she had a strange sense of doom as she saw Dad driving away. Unfortunately, her foreboding was realized. Dad crushed with a truck that was driving dangerously over the center line. When my mom and grandma rushed to the hospital, the doctor told them there was no hope of a revival. But Dad hung on in unconscious state for 8 days. Mom dozed off next to Dad's bed and had a strange dream. A giant of a man was dragging away a coffin, and in the coffin was Dad. Mom could not hear his voice, but could see his lips making, "Help me." She rushed to block the giant's way and begged him to let Dad go. The giant dropped the coffin and told Mom to carry it back then if she dared. Having no other option, she went at it with her all might, but the coffin wouldn't budge. In the end, she grabbed Dad's feet, dragged him out of the coffin, and back to where they started. And then she woke up from the dream. And just seconds later, my dad also gained consciousness. At first, he wasn't coherent, but as he got lucid over the following days, he also told Mom what he had dreamed while he was in coma. Dad met Grandpa in the dream, who passed away when Dad was a teenager. Dad was very happy to reunite with his late father and spent a few happy days with him. But suddenly Grandpa flipped and angrily shouted to Dad that he came too early, he should go back right away. Dad didn't want to part with Grandpa, whom he'd been missing for so many years. But Grandpa beat Dad with a big broomstick till he fell into a pond. He floundered and cried for help, but the more he struggled, the deeper he went under, as if somebody was pulling him down by his feet. He looked down and saw Mom holding onto his feet and pulling him down. Dad suddenly realized where he was not the world he belonged to, and finally let himself sink down. And that was when he woke up from the coma. My dad still had scars on his face from the accident. He told me the story only when I got old enough to understand things, and the fact that how my parents' separate dreams intricately linked makes it impossible to just brush off as coincidence. I had this dream when I was probably 10 or 11. In the dream, I was on my summer vacation and was enjoying the lazy morning sleep in bed. I was woken up by the noises from the outside of my room. Dad was clearly getting ready to go out, presumably to work. I could reach the doorknob from the bed, so I crack opened it and called out, "Daddy?" with my eyes still half closed. I waited for his usual gentle voice calling me his puppy and kissing me with a whiff of his aftershave. Silence. I sat up from bed and looked outside. Dad was wearing a white cloak made with stiff hemp cloth and was about to put his shoes on. "Daddy, where are you going?" I asked. But Dad didn't respond. Instead, he called out to Grandma, presumably in the living room. "Mother, I'm leaving now." I felt odd. His strange clothes and the whole situation. I tried to get off the bed, but found my legs feeling like a ton. I tried my best to get up, but it only made my back hurt. I kept calling out, "Daddy? Daddy?" But it didn't even turn to look at me, and went out of the door. When I woke up, it was still before the dawn. I just bursted into tears with indescribable sense of lament. My older sister came to console me, but I was too scared to talk about the dream. At the time, my dad was in the hospital. I was told he was suffering cerebral hemorrhage, but only years later I learned he was then already brain dead and was expected to pass away. And indeed he did, in the morning I had that dream. When I was little, I felt it sorry that he didn't respond to my desperate call for him in the dream. But I understand now that was most like him to the last moment. In life, as the firstborn son, he was so upright, didn't show his emotions, and always treated Grandma with the utmost respect. My dad, who gave up his dream to support a family, but nevertheless encouraged me to carry on with my dream. I pray he went to a peaceful place in his white hemp cloak. It's from when I was 11. One evening I went to bed early, feeling drowsier than usual, and had a strange dream. All of my family, my parents, sister, and I were all dressed in our Sunday best and waiting for a bus at a stop. Soon a bus arrived, and I, my sister, and Mom got on. But before Dad could hop on, the driver started closing the door. I screamed to the driver, "What are you doing?" But he replied coldly, "He can't ride this bus." But, well, because it was in a dream, I blocked the closing door by force. The driver, in response, started the bus. In desperation, I held out my hand to Dad, who was still standing on the street. With my aid, Dad tried to jump on the bus, but it seemed an invisible force pushing him out whenever he tried. Then another bus approached to the side of our bus. The door of the second bus opened up, and its driver shouted to Dad to hop on. By then, Dad was exhausted and seemed to follow the instruction, but I felt something wasn't right. I grabbed on Dad's hand even tighter, and in the end, Dad just kept running along our bus. When I woke up from the strange yet vivid dream. Following day, we got a call informing that Dad had an accident at his work and was sent to a hospital. We all rushed to the hospital. Dad worked as a builder and was hit by a falling iron rebar.
He was very lucky. The rebar missed his head and his injury is not serious other than the cracked shoulder,
the doctor told us. True to his assurance, Dad could walk out of the hospital after a few days. I heard it only later that my grandma, alarmed with the accident, took Dad to a shaman. And the shaman said after taking one look at my dad, "Thanks to your daughter, you're still alive today. She saved you." I tend to get lots of weird dreams, not quite precognitive, but something more of a déjà vu kind. For example, I and my family were on holiday and looking for the way to the famous local restaurant. None of us had ever been to that area, and the restaurant was tucked away in the maze of back street. Even with the help of map, we were struggling. But I sensed it looked somewhat familiar. I remembered I did find my way through those roads to the restaurant once in a dream. Indeed, I could lead the way, and voila, at the end of it was the restaurant we were looking for. One of the most memorable of such dreams came when I was 5. That's 13 years ago, but I still remember all the details like yesterday. My grandpa, Mom's father, particularly adored me among his 9 grandchildren, probably because my mom was his favorite little girl. I frequently visited him and spent time together, like 6 days a week. One day I had a dream. My family and I were on the way to some sort of event. We were all formally dressed in black. We had to walk up a long stairs to get to the car waiting for us. Strangely, as we walked past, the steps behind us fell into darkness. But I didn't think much of it, probably because it was in a dream. Then a very old man clad in rags walked past us. He was clearly drunk, with a bottle in his hand. I suddenly felt worried about him and turned back to look at him. And at that same moment, the old man too turned to look at me. Not a few seconds later, his knees suddenly gave in and he tumbled hard down the long stairs. People screamed and Dad covered my sister's eyes, but I saw everything clearly. How blood pooled under the fallen old man's bald head. His bony, fragile body seemed just crumpled up in the impact. I woke up with a shock and cried quite some time even after I realized it was just a dream. But I didn't realize its significance for a very long time. It was a memorial ritual day for Grandpa 2 years ago. Mom would usually talk about her late dad on such an occasion, but that day she seemed particularly missing him and talked more about his last days. That he died of a cerebral hemorrhage, but the real killer was his long-term alcoholism and malnutrition. It reminded me of my dream from years back, so I later discreetly asked my dad more about Grandpa's death. Grandpa was always skinny and baldy, the result of his alcohol abuse and disregard of proper diet. But in those last days, while he was hospitalized for the hemorrhage, he got even bolder and even bonier, just like the old man I saw in my dream. What I clearly remember is, in my dream, in those few seconds when our gazes interlocked, how his sad eyes brightened up with a genuine happiness. I don't think anything could have changed even if I knew the significance of the dream at the time, but maybe I could have been at least better prepared for his death had I known. But some of such dreams had more significant impact. When I was 7, Mom regularly met with her friends, all married and had children of their own. The kids were usually left to play among themselves while the adults chatted. One day in a dream, I was exactly in such a situation. The barbecue restaurant where Mom and friends met had a large playground to it, so kids and I were let out to play there after the meal. Everything was so real. There was even a restaurant staff watching over the kids for their safety. I must have been playing around, trying out various slides, swings, seesaw, and so on. Then I found a strange hall that looked like an entry to a long slide at a corner. There were long queues for all the other things, and the restaurant staff wasn't paying attention, so without much concern, I jumped in. The slide ride felt unusually long, probably about 3 times longer than the others. Where I landed from the slide was not in the playground, but a construction site next to the restaurant. It was a full glass structure on all 4 sides, including the ceiling. Curiously, I stepped into the building, and the next moment, the glass shattered and rained down on me. In that short instant, I thought I was going to die and closed my eyes. But when I opened my eyes again, I found another single shard of glass among what must have been thousands fell around me, as if there was some protective shield over me. On the following day after the dream, my mom met her friends at a barbecue restaurant that looked exactly like the one I saw in the dream. There was even a building still under construction next to it, though it wasn't clad in glass all sides, but the facade. On the side was a pile of pipes. And just like in a dream, I and other kids played in the playground, which was smaller than in my dream, but nevertheless resembled the basic layout. Nothing much happened, and there was no strange hall at the corner, of course. After the meeting, we were waiting for a taxi on the street side. I suddenly felt a chill from the side of the building under construction, an urgent feeling that we should get away from it. I actually don't remember what exactly happened afterwards, but Mom would say that I pushed her hard, and together we fell on the ground. When, with a loud bang, metal pipes got loose and rolled over to the glass facade, shattering it. The rain of glass shard fell and covered the pavement where we were standing just moments ago. I don't want to imagine what might have happened if it were not for the dream. It's a story from my older sister. She's born with what people call a strong chi, a kind of person who would fight off even if she should encounter a ghost or a grim reaper in a dream. She's been happily married for 7 years and has a 6-year-old cute son. One day she had a dream. She found herself standing in a very dark place. When her eyes finally got used to the darkness, she saw her little son walking away. She naturally followed him, but strangely, she could not catch up while he moved further and further away. She kept running after, increasingly more desperate, until she reached a river. And in the river was her son, drowning, waving his mom for help. My sister can't swim. She could not dare to jump in the deep, dark water, and just dropped on the ground and helplessly cried for somebody to help her son. And then she woke up. And right from the following evening, her son suffered high fever reaching 40 degrees Celsius. They ran to the emergency, but doctors could not diagnose what was causing it. They just assured such could happen for a little kids even with a minor infection or a cold. But temperature wouldn't go down even after 2 days. Little boy was hospitalized, but the mystery fever carried on for a week. One day, my sister dozed off next to her son's hospital bed and had another dream. This time she found herself in front of a grand-looking traditional villa. She walked in, and on the open floor was 2 rows of tables set with all sorts of glorious-looking food. They looked so tempting that her hands was reaching out for them despite of herself. When she noticed people sitting cross-legged behind the tables. They were all elderly, all dressed in white, and all staring in the air, giving no attention to the delicacies in front of them. My sister found it so odd, and her eyes followed all these expressionless faces. And at the end of the table was an old woman glaring at my sister. Her large, sharp eyes were full of anger. As I said, my sister is no softy, and she, rather than running away, walked right up to the old woman, never shying away from the angry stare. She somehow sensed that she shouldn't lose this staring contest no matter what, so she just faced all the cold, angry gaze of the old woman and stared right back. And that's when she woke up. And again from the following day, her son started getting quickly better and could come back home again. He's all healthy boy now who would enjoy wrestling with me. My sister could not just brush off the sequence of her 2 odd dreams and her son's illness and seek the shaman in the later day. The shaman said my sister should have saved her son in the first dream, and apparently failing that resulted in his fever. And the food in the second dream represented food for memorial ritual, in other words, for the dead people, and if she had eaten any of it, it would have meant her ending up with eating the food for memorial ritual for her own son. The scary old woman was Granny Samsin, the goddess of birth in Korean mythology. She was meaning to take little boy's life away, but my sister's ferocious counter eventually saved his life. Who can tell if the shaman's explanation is true? But how my sister's dream foreshadowed her son's illness and recovery is indeed a spooky coincidence. Hi, it's Anthony here, and thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's stories. Psychologically speaking, I think it should be one of the most painful things having to watch your beloved ones suffer or even dying, and the sense of guilt for not being able to help them could translate into such dreams as in today's stories. But whether you believe these dreams had significance or not, I find it touching nonetheless because it clearly shows people's love and attachment to their loved ones. Do you find such stories as in today's episode in your culture too? Namely, one gets to save a life through one's action in a dream. My idea that it might be specifically Korean might be wrong, so help me to figure it out. If you enjoyed my work, please give it a like and a comment, and do consider subscribing to my channel. If you'd support the channel more directly, I also opened a Buy Me a Coffee account. The link's in the description. In whichever way, I always appreciate your support. Thank you. I'll come back next Sunday. Until then, stay safe and take care.